In today's video, we're going to be talking about base building. Now, base building is incredibly important in Minecraft because everybody knows that your base is kind of like the heart of the world that you're playing in. If you have a rubbish base, then you're not going to have a very good time playing in the world. So hopefully I can help you guys out a little bit. So let's start things off by talking about the mindset. Yeah, that's right, I'm taking this video very seriously. Now, one thing that I would definitely suggest is to start from a central point and then expand out from there. That way you kind of get a natural focal point. Now, it doesn't have to be quite as obvious as this one. I mean, this is a very obvious focal point, but if you kind of spread out from one central important location, then it will make it look like your base has purpose. And purpose is incredibly important. We've gone right the way back to Hermitcraft Season 2 here. You see, this little base area right here, pretty cool. It's got storage for all of my farms. It's all kind of centered around this mob farm right here, and I had all sorts of important things going on in my base area. It had purpose. It was where I needed to be because it's where my items were, and it's where my items were being produced. But then I started work on another project. If we just fly over this minecart rail right here, we make our way to the fishing village. Now, this was a project that I personally just lost all motivation for, and the viewers just lost all interest in because they could clearly tell that I was never going to come over here. There was no reason for me to build this thing other than something to do. But that's it. There's no purpose to it, and that means that it never got utilized and I burnt out instantly. So you need to make sure that your base actually has function. You're also going to want to make sure that you leave plenty of room for expansion, something that I messed up in Hermitcraft Season 5. I built up my Guardian farm, cleared out the space in the ocean, without really thinking about the fact that I then needed to build a base around this. So then, of course, I built up the so-called coffee tables around the base area, and that seemed like a pretty smart solution, but then I fell foul to another problem, which is I gave them border walls. Whenever possible, do not give yourself surrounding walls unless you can make sure that you can fill those surrounding walls. The problem is you either run out of space or you can't fill the space. Neither one is good. This first example was fantastic. It worked brilliantly. I love the way that it looks, but if we pop over to the other ones, they begin to look increasingly naff until we reach this point here, where I had totally run out of ideas for things to fill the space with, but I had to fill the space because otherwise it looked even worse. It really was a tricky situation to be in. And what made it even more challenging is the fact that I designed this thing entirely around symmetry. Everything was symmetrical in 4 directions, and that just became a nightmare, a total nightmare. I mean, look, you can see there's duplicates of farms on either side. Everything had to be perfectly symmetrical, and if anything wasn't, for example, this villager breeder right here, it sticks out like a sore thumb. And also, I centered the entire base around 2 blocks because the Guardian farm has got a central point of 2 blocks, and that makes life even more challenging. So whatever you do, try your best to not have symmetry in your base. Or at the very least, have a kind of hybridized symmetry like what we have going on in Hermitcraft Season 6, where certain elements of the base are symmetrical, but other elements aren't. It makes life so much better. You also have to understand when it comes to getting into the mindset of base building that you're going to spend about 90% of the time that you spend in your base inside the storage system. There's no two ways about it. No matter how beautiful you make the rest of your base, you're going to spend most of your time here. So you best make sure that you make it beautiful and also smart. Accessibility is incredibly important, and also just having all of the items that you need within arm's reach is going to allow you to play Minecraft so very efficiently. I told you I was taking this video seriously. Anyway, let's get into the before building section. And always, I can't say this enough, test things out in creative mode testing worlds before you build them in survival mode, because otherwise you make mistakes. Obviously, you try out things that don't work, but you've done it without investing too much time. I mean, take a look at this, for example. This is the original test that I made for my Hermitcraft Season 6 base, and as you can see, once this lag spike finishes, originally I was going to go with octagons. That would have looked absolutely horrendous, and also I was going to have stone, cobblestone, and all this stuff wrapping around the inside of that iron block area there. Once again, would have looked absolutely horrendous, really ugly. So I'm so glad that I tried it out in a creative mode testing world and decided, yeah, that's horrible, let's try something different. I would have absolutely kicked myself if I hadn't done that, built it in survival mode, then had to tear it all down because I hated it. And if you're really struggling with inspiration and ideas, obviously YouTube is a really good place to go. Just go to your favourite content creators, click on their videos, and see what they're up to, and maybe you might come up with some ideas. Be smart with the materials that you're using to build your base. Now, as much as I love my Hermitcraft Season 6 base, it's built out of really annoying materials. Every single time I want to build something big, I have to spend hours resource gathering. Whereas in Hermitcraft Season 5, my Guardian farm was producing all of these blocks at all times. It meant that if I wanted to build something massive, I just had to grab the items out the chest and start constructing. It was amazing. And in case you're wondering, this is probably the worst block to build your base out of. It's lovely, okay, it looks great, but, oh my word, you are going to hate yourself for doing it. Now, this is going to be fairly controversial, so bear with me, but I would always argue that you should go for scale over detail, especially if you're limited on time. If you've got infinite time, then go ahead, build something massive that's got tons of detail. I can't wait to see it. But if you're just your average person trying to build a base, I would always say, go for something big as opposed to something incredibly detailed. Simply because it's always very soul destroying when you commit hours upon hours to something that is actually in reality relatively small. Know your strengths and know how you like to play the game. This is Scar's base on the Hermitcraft server. It's one of the coolest bases I've ever seen. It's seriously so beautiful, but I would absolutely hate to build it. I would despise every second. It would be horrible for me, much like it would be horrible for Scar to try and build my base, which is very geometric and filled to the brim with redstone contraptions. We both have totally different playstyles, so we should build bases that fit those playstyles. Honestly, the number of times I get messages from people saying things like, hey, I hate Redstone, but after watching your Hermitcraft series, I was inspired, I tried to build a base like yours, and I've lost all motivation, what should I do? It's like, maybe don't build a totally redstone-based base then. That's probably the smart move. Now, I know I said earlier on that this was a stupid setup, but at least it's a block palette. It's a set of blocks that I've chosen to use throughout my base. Don't just choose whatever blocks you fancy willy-nilly, because you're going to end up with a higgledy-piggledy mess. Just try your best to pick a small selection of blocks that you dip into to actually create your projects. Alright, so I think I've got all the pre-build ideas lined up. Now let's move on to the actual building. And the first thing that you should do is choose your location wisely. For example, if you want to build a beautiful cityscape with gorgeously mowed lawns that are bright green and lovely flowers, don't construct it in a swamp, okay? Just make sure that you don't do that. And you may think that's ridiculous and that nobody would do that, but I actually built my Hermitcraft Season 3 base in a swamp, and I had to deal with the horrible swamp colours. Always gather up all the resources you need to build the project before you start and get them set up in a temporary storage system where you're actually building the project. Nothing kills your flow like having to go out and grab the items from your storage system, and it's even worse if you actually have to go out and gather more resources. That's just horrible. Now, when it comes to actually constructing the thing, I would always suggest building up a skeleton first. So don't fill in any of the walls or anything like that. Just get the skeleton outlined, so then you can get a rough feel for the scale of things, where certain bits are going to go, and you can make changes easily. And that brings me really nicely onto my next point, which is that if something looks like it's going wrong, feel free to just take a step back and think about it for a while. Don't keep going and push on through and think, oh, it'll probably be alright once it's done, because if it's not, you will have wasted more time and the cleanup will take longer as well. Take some breaks, sleep on it, and also feel free to go back on big decisions. For example, in Hermitcraft Season 6, I was certain I was going to be going for octagons. I had that in my head, I had spoken about it in multiple episodes, it was going to be that way, and I had been thinking about it for months. And then I tried it, and it never ended up working, and I totally flipped on my decision. And the same thing goes for this building right here. This has gone through a ton of different redesigns actually on the Hermitcraft server, as I'm sure most of you will remember. Sometimes you have to be big enough to just accept that you've messed up. Just take it all down and start again. Now, when it comes to actually building the thing, remember to bring adequate scaffolding. There's nothing worse than getting stuck in certain locations. Now, I personally like to use slime blocks because they're renewable if you've got a slime block farm, and of course they can be broken instantly, even in survival mode, without the use of a pickaxe. The only thing I will say is that if you're building a redstone contraption that has slime blocks in it, maybe you might want to choose something else, because you can occasionally get them confused and break things. Okay, time to move on to the next section, which is what you do once the base is done. It can be difficult to keep your motivation. I mean, in a way, the main project of your survival player experience has been completed. So now you need to find other things to do. And once again, I want to revisit that point of building with a purpose. Don't just build pointless things for the sake of it. For example, as much as I love the aquarium area, how many times did we actually come in here outside of when we were building it? Once we finished this project, we just kind of walked away from it and never came in here again, because there's no point to it. There was no reason for it to actually be here. So it was just a bit of a dud. I think it's important to remember that even if you've already constructed something, it's not necessarily finalized. For example, I already have a melon and pumpkin farm in my base, but it wasn't quite good enough. So I thought I would upgrade it by building this gigantic industrial thing. Which brings me quite nicely onto my next point, which is that not everything has to be constructed in your base. You can go somewhere else, start work on other massive projects that actually have purpose, that work well, and bring that fire back to you. This witch farm project that I worked on, and then all of the farms that are going to be going into this gigantic hole, has just brought total new life to my Hermitcraft season, and I'm so happy that I decided to take these projects on. So there we go, those are my tips and tricks. I hope that you found them useful. If you have any other suggestions, please let me know down in the comment section. I'd love to hear your feedback. But anyway, if you did enjoy, please be sure to hit that like button, and if you really loved it, then make sure to subscribe. But thanks for watching, guys. This has been Mumbo, and I'm out. I'll see you later.